Welcome everybody, Dr. James Petrick with Prior Lake Spinal Care. This is day number 9 out of 9 Tic Tac A.D.I.O. X3. We're so glad that you're here with us. We are coming at you a little bit late. It was rainy. I had a patient that showed up on the later side of things. Nothing to blame her. She has a new job and it was raining and it started thundering and lightning on her way to the clinic. And then I had to run home and get my son, and I'm actually sitting in the parking lot at his karate practice. So I've got the mobile hotspot going. Hopefully we don't lose connection. And I've got the flashlight on my phone. That's why I look kind of creepy right now. I did get a new pair of glasses, so let me know what you think of these. So here we go. It is day 9 out of 9 Tic Tac A.D.I.O. And I want to share a story with you. This was back in 2017. I took a nap. I had the condo to myself in San Diego, and I woke up, and you should feel well rested after a nice Saturday afternoon nap, right? And I didn't. I woke up, and I found myself staring at a bookcase. And I'm looking at that bookcase, and I see all these books, and I'm wondering, how much of that information do I know? How much of it am I implementing? How much of it am I using? Was that a waste of time and money? I'm a slow reader. I don't have time for fiction. I read all nonfiction. I like to reread the same stuff. I write highlights and notes and stuff in the margin. And I wondered if I could even stand up and give a 2-sentence book report to my 3rd grade class. And that was kind of, that was really depressing for a couple of minutes. I was still lying there on my side. And then a peace came over me. It was really strange. And that peace somehow said, it's okay. You don't have to stand up and give a book report to Miss Odegaard's class. All you need to do is to connect one idea to the next. And at that moment, I had resolved to be a better journaler. From that point on, a journal entry would no longer be a memorial for an aha moment or where good ideas would then go to die. Instead, it would be a means for me to connect my dots. And this whole presentation, Tic Tac A.D.I.O, above, down, inside out, this is an attempt, a 20-year-long attempt, but especially probably since 2017, since I've been journaling a certain way, to really put into perspective something that happened to me. Now, I say this happened to me because this was my first patient that I ever had out of thousands of people that I've taken care of over the last 20 years practically. February 7th, 2005, this Marine, Frederick, came in across the street from the Miramar air station where a lot of Top Gun was actually filmed, and he had a lower back problem. He threw out his lower back while doing a takedown maneuver, and I never touched his lower back. All I touched was his neck. And within a month and a half maybe, he passes his physical, he goes out to Iraq, and he has his deployment. He comes back a year and a half later, and he knocks on the door. And I was kind of annoyed. We weren't even open yet. We had this glass storefront out there. I get my keys, I unlock it, and he always addressed me like I was a drill sergeant. He says, "Mr. Petrick," and it's a good thing he said that right away because I didn't really recognize him. It was kind of dark like it is now. And I recognized his voice right away, Georgia accent, southeast somewhere. And he said, "Hey, it's Fred," and I won't say his last name. He said, "It's Frederick. I just got back from Iraq, and I just want you to know that if it wasn't for you and your adjustments, I wouldn't have been able to deploy and find all those bombs with my K9 unit, those IEDs, which is like a homemade explosive device that the civilians in Iraq were trying to ambush them with." And then he says, I flew this flag for you, and here's a copy of a poem that I wrote. And this is not a Dr. Seuss rhymey type of poem. I'll highlight some of the things here, but he said he wondered why he was there in Iraq Is it to try to save and oppress people from a depressed country? No. He said, I am here for my God, for my family, for my friends, and for my country. For that I would kill, and for that I would die. He talks about seeing Marines get sniped and blown up and burned alive, and he was wondering why he was there, and he had the presence of mind to pause and call on his, come from his higher self, you might say, his optimized self, to put things into perspective and to write this poem. And what's interesting is when he came into me, he was in adaptive mode. When he came to see me the first time, his body was, he could hardly move. He'd hobbled in there as much as I'd seen anyone hobble in over the past 20 years. And I share that because I had felt compelled to create a story that would really do that justice. Notice all the things that he talked about. He talked about God, as we've talked about a layer 3, a spiritual aspect of our health. He talked about his family and his friends, layer 2, you might say, of A.D.I.O, the mental, emotional, and social concept. And he credited me, or he credited chiropractic adjustments, me working on his physical shell down there at layer 1, for allowing him to go out there in the first place. There's a lot of talk these days about mission statements and vision statements. Well, his vision was his mission. If he didn't see it, if he didn't see going out there for his boys with his canine unit, see, he could have just had medical leave, but he wanted to go. He wanted to come across the street to pay me cash. He didn't want to do the Marine Corps routine of medicate, then diagnostics, then probably more medication, then medical leave, or possibly even discharge to get him off the books. And so that's something that we take very seriously. But I want to tell you about the fact that, you know, this isn't about academic. This isn't just, oh, we got some new ideas and we're just going to put it out there and see what people think about this. This is about application. And it's nothing intellectual. We're talking about big words and we've defined some new things. But this is very intuitive. And again, this isn't mystical anything. This is math. We're talking about the new E equals MC squared for a new era. I mean, you got artificial intelligence that is robbing people's authenticity and claiming authenticity. And I didn't say that. That was, you know, these are real threat. And so being truly authentic in all 3 of these layers is not only a thing that's edifying or interesting, it's kind of in a way a matter of survival. All of this has to do with you getting more of your chiropractic care, enhancing every layer of your being, and potentially even saving someone's life, as we've covered in previous live streams. So let's talk a little bit about E equals MC squared. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, nobody knows what E equals MC squared is, or they certainly don't know how to apply it to their lives. Yet it's somehow this breakthrough algebra that Einstein came up with that explains relativity and a lot of the quantum unseen world, how little particles move. Right? There was Newtonian mechanics or physics, studying the apple, and you drop the apple and you can measure the speed of the apple. But Einstein really brought to us the quantum explanation for why things work at an invisible quantum sort of a particle level, right? But what I want you to get out of this is simplicity. Okay, that's why. And few are more simpler. Indeed, the immortal equations fame rests largely on that utter simplicity. Okay, and we won't even get into the energy of the system and equal to the mass and whatever. The next thing that I want us to keep in mind is that the last word here in this one is explosion. Right? The E equals MC squared explains how you can take a little particle of something and under the correct conditions, you can make an H-bomb and you can blow up like 1,000 square kilometers off the face of the map. And that's a scary thing. But it's also a very powerful thing because look at this next thing. It's interchangeable, right? Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, okay? So it talks about the way things are, but it also talks about how things got there in the first place. But we're not going to be overwhelmed by the complexity of it. We're going to embrace the beauty and the simplicity of it. We talked before about the Mandelbrot set and how when you take a one thing and add another with the correct ingredients, this is what you can get. This is what a simple algebraic equation gives us. Repeated shapes that are interchangeable. Benoit Mandelbrot said that endless, bottomless wonders come from come from simple rules repeated without end. Bottomless wonders come from simple rules repeated without end. And so we've talked about integration. We've talked about at that bottom layer. And here's how, I'll explain that in a second. That bottom layer, how you have the unchanging principle. The nerve system controls everything. It is the master system. The dilemma of nerve interference is bad, but the removal of nerve interference is good. And freedom of nerve interference on the far right, the impact or the explosion, is the best way to live. Layer 2. The mind governs over the body. That is the fixed principle. The variable or the dilemma is, are you going to be subject to unintentional disintegration, or are you going to intentionally integrate? And the translation or the result is, if you want to be great, then you must intentionally integrate. And we talked a lot about how to do that. And on layer 3, we talked about the importance of identity, but we also talked about how trials, we can all agree that trials are inevitable. And therefore, the dilemma is, and by the way, all of these are well within your choice. They're within your ability to act on them. You can be a trial victim. Oh, this thing happened to me. And maybe that's true. There's things that are outside of your control. But you know what? Other people might not think you're a victim. They might think that they're a bigger victim than you. So that creates even more friction points. Or you could be a trial denier. Oh, everything is good in life. There's no such thing as trials. My life is awesome, and I'm just going to pretend that that thing isn't going on. Or you can be a trial embracer. And we recommend saying that you're a trial embracer. And by the way, down here, that little nap epiphany that I had, this, I believe, the Mandelbrot set, as described in an earlier live stream, is kind of the fulfillment of that. And all of this is, I like to think of as the fulfillment of telling the story that puts Frederick's testimonial into context. But I referred to before that, I don't want to preach, but I also don't want to plagiarize. And the fact is that so much, at least 90% of layers 3 and 2, comes straight from the first paragraph in the book of James. Now, I had heard for years that James is one of the wisest words ever written, maybe the wisdom book of the New Testament. It really caught my attention because that's my first name. And, I'm not going to say what all the verses are, but simply know that James 1 through 8, which there's 8 solids, as you know, in the game of billiards, so that's why I call it the solids. Those 8 verses touch on themes ranging from identity and the fact that spiritual well-being is more important than social well-being. If you don't have a context there, if you don't know who or what you are, what your purpose is, you can't really put a lot of other things into context. And so that comes before horizontal, I guess, relationships here on this planet, you might say. It talks about joy in these first 8 verses. Joy is a better ideal than being happy. The culture tells us to be happy. The problem with that is we can have a dopamine spike, and then what happens after the dopamine? You can only be happy for like 20 minutes at a time, practically. It tells us that trials are inevitable. It tells us the purpose of trials. And when we have that perspective, we can then relax and be, yes, an idealist, but also a realistic idealist because the trial comes. But if we ask God for wisdom, and if we do it with singleness of mind, layer number 2, and why it's important to have singleness of mind, and how we've defined that integration, which is connection, which is what everybody wants in all 3 of these layers. The definition of that is the coordination of various mental processes into a normal, effective personality or with the environment. And that's why it's so important to be able to engage your ability to reason, intuit, perceive from different angles, engage your willpower, and have an imagination, a childlike imagination that's well organized and disciplined, as well as to be able to call on your memory. And that's why we say that our past trials, our unresolved trials, are really a gold mine towards getting us, reminding us of what our trajectory should be, getting us singleness of mind, so that we can position ourselves to ask God for wisdom. So that's a summary of A.D.I.O. X3. All of this is patterned off of the chiropractic adjustment. If you don't believe in any of the religious interpretations, that's fine. Again, I don't want to plagiarize. That's why I mentioned this, and I didn't say what the verses are because I don't want to preach. But I would challenge maybe 5% of the people that might be offended by me bringing that up to see if those virtues are not completely in line scientifically and pragmatically and philosophically in line with truth in terms of spiritual well-being as well as mental, emotional, and social well-being. Now here at Prior Lake Spinal Care, we have a lot of other resources on eating correctly and exercise and how much water you should be drinking and things. But again, if we don't have the personal leverage to cultivate the will to engage all these things in the first place, it's going to be short-lived. And I feel like if you can be a better fisherman or woman, then you can get more of the fish on your own, provided you keep your spine free of nerve interference. Well, it has been a privilege and an honor to share this information with you. This is A.D.I.O. X3. Nobody is talking about this as far as I know, and it's very unique, and this all is why you should be seeing the chiropractor regularly, and you should really be sending in everybody you know. And if you have any questions about any of this information, please feel free to text me or shoot me an email at any time. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good night.